Welcome to Come and See, your podcast for finding truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by All for Jesus Living Waters Ministry. With host and founder Richard Case and co-host and retreat leader Kathy Ricconi. Today is our special guest day, where we will hear from a friend of the ministry who will share their insight and stories on truth in this chaotic world. And now your host, Richard Case.
Well, good morning, everybody. This is Guest Thursday, and we are continuing part two with very special guest Colton and Alicia Cardie, who have just returned from the Philippines. They're going to share that story, and now they are moving into a. Are you moving into a new house tomorrow? Is that you're closing it or starting to?
Closing.
Wow.
Closing. We've been moved in for 7 months now.
So this is a house you kind of rented and now you're able to buy it. Well, I would love to hear that story. So that's going to be fun here. And so their domicile, Kathy, is Colorado, but they've been on one heck of an adventure for 4 years, going to various places, and they've followed God everywhere.
I'm excited to hear this whole story.
Cool. They've been married 4 years and learned to abiding and learned to hear God's voice and excitement of the joy of that. And so tell us a little bit about you. How did you come about with this house, and particularly now that you decided God had you buy it, which is an interesting piece. Tell us about how that all came about.
Yeah, the whole story is long, but I'll give you the shorter version of it. And basically, after God called us out of Cincinnati, and so we left there, but he didn't tell us where to go. So we went to Iceland. We were in Iceland for 3 months, and we're just kind of like waiting for God to tell us what was next. And our visa, they're expired after 3 months. So we came back to the States and we met with Rich and Linda, and they're like, oh, if you're just waiting for God to tell you, what to do, it's like that's fatalism. You're supposed to be asking, seeking, and knocking, and actually pressing in, leaning in. And we're like, okay. So then we started processing where do we actually want to be? And the answer was Colorado. We got community here. We love the state.
Love the mountains, the sun, the weather.
All of it.
What's not to love, right?
That's right.
Yeah. Well, we just come from Iceland in November, where you get 5 hours of sun.
Yeah.
So
it was one of the things I was like, all right, so that's the opposite of what I wanted.
He uses everything to reveal his will, right?
Everything. But yeah, we bounced around a lot over the course of the next year. But we ended up, my parents, they did a new build, like a condo, and they're living there now. And the developer of that land had he had 2 houses on a large piece of property, and they had cut off a lot of the land to use for a development project, and the houses were not selling. And so I got connected with him through my dad, and we were able to rent one of the houses in exchange for rehabbing it, which is my background in the real estate. So I rehabbed it, and that was good. But then the one that we were in, it was the smaller of the two. I apparently did a good job because it sold. So we moved over to the next one, and we were trying to buy it. And for about 3 months, I was talking with the owner, and I was like, hey, if you want to get rid of this, I would love to buy it. But we didn't really have any way to buy it. We didn't qualify for a mortgage traditionally, and we didn't have much cash. And so I was like, if you want to owner finance it to us, essentially, and we don't put any down, then we'd love to have it. If you'll give it to us for free, we'd love to have it. And the answer,
you're quite the negotiator.
Yeah.
Well, God's a good negotiator, because long story short, we ended up getting something very similar to that deal, to where he was like, hey, I'll lease it to you with an option to purchase it. And the option to purchase it was very low. And we were allowed to live there and work on the house while we were there. And part of that option was, when we sold it, he would give us the net difference between whatever the house sold for and whatever our option price was, just as a reward for doing all the work for him.
Sure.
And we weren't completely obedient because God God had told us initially, like, don't borrow for it. So like he came back, he's like, all right, like if you give me 100,000, which we didn't have, he's like if you give us 100,000, like we'd be able to work something out. And I'm like, no. He's like, and then like like a month later, he's like, all right, like we could do 50,000. And I'm like, no. And then like 2 weeks later, he's like, all right, I'm ready to make a deal. And we made a deal, and it was a great deal. But I think the part where we had been very faithful and like listening to God. God's like, don't borrow, like he's going to give this to us, and he did. But then immediately after he gave it to us, we borrowed money to rehab the house. It seemed like a very clear and logical decision, because like if I borrow money to rehab this, like I can add 1,500 square feet in the basement. Like that's a very clear, like there's going to be a good ROI there. But there was, just a whole lot of things with like us, like with the scope of the work, plus with me leaving for the Philippines for 2 months, which I didn't plan on doing. We ended up being at a point where after I got back from the Philippines, the work was not done, and our option was expiring in like 3 weeks, and like all the work that I had left to someone else to do, all of it was still left to be done. And so I had like 2 months worth of work, and I had 3 weeks to do it, and we were already over budget. And which is, yeah, anyways.
It was stressful.
It was very stressful. And because the problem was, what we were looking, because we had decided, and through kind of our processing, that we were going to buy it ourselves. And if we bought it for a certain price, we would be able to get all of our cash out, and like pay back the people that had or the friend that had lent to us. But if we didn't get that price, then we didn't have enough cash to buy it, because we didn't have enough cash to leave in it, and our option was expiring, so we didn't have enough time to list it and sell it. Wow. So it's like, oh, like if this doesn't work out perfectly, we're not only going to lose our money, we're going to lose someone else's money. It was just a very stressful mess.
Yeah, we had a moment on the couch in the living room upstairs. Like we had built out this basement upstairs, but like, before we left for the Philippines, it was exciting and like, wow, like look how much we did, and it's so cool. And then we came back, and there was like this tangible heaviness in the air. Yeah. It was like it was hard to be there. Like it just, I know I'm a woman, it made me want to cry. I don't think it made Colton, maybe it did. But it was like I don't want to be here anymore. And it was so hard. And we had a moment on the couch where I was like, we were talking through, and I think it should be now forward. It should be, but we were looking at our past. We were like, where did we go wrong? We were like, we made some mistakes. We were thinking about the amount we borrowed, and just, we came to a point where we had to have the conversation like, okay, well, God could miraculously provide, because it would be a miracle at this point. Mm-hmm. It could be a miracle, or he could just allow the natural consequences to happen, and we may be in debt. And it was like, but we just have to, number one, stand on the promise that he'll provide without having preconceived notions of what that looks like. Maybe he'll provide in spite of the debt, or maybe he'll provide through this miracle right now. But like, are we prepared for that, basically? Because we don't want to be caught in a position where, we picture God's provision looking one way, and then we're in debt, and suddenly we don't trust God anymore because we thought he was going to provide this way, but maybe he had a way through.
That's so good.
Natural consequence. So we had to have that come to Jesus moment. And in doing that, I think it changed the attitude a little bit. There was still stress, there was still doubt, there was still worry and anxiety all around us. But we were going to stand firm on that promise of provision that we felt we had received from the Lord, no matter what it looked like.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we ended up getting the appraisal we needed. We got more than we needed, which was a miracle, because the house was not done.
It did not.
The house was basically still a construction zone, and the guy came in, and he's like, "Oh yeah, like this is great." I'm like, "I don't see that," but and so yeah, we're buying it tomorrow, and so we're putting in we'll be in it, I think like 120,000, and then post closing, in exchange for the work I do, I think we'll be credited back like 160 or 170. And
That's
so that
excellent.
will be able to like reimburse the down payment. We'll be able to reimburse the friend that lent us money for building out the basement, and we'll be able to do some. We'll be able to finish part of our something else we received in the Philippines with our generosity. But I'm getting ahead of myself. But God provided. So
Yeah.
and
It was
yeah.
there's the miracle there.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow, fantastic. So you get to so you've been in that house already, and then now do you have more work to do to finish it now? You gotta
Yes.
you'll do that kind of work yourself, right? Mostly, or
Yeah, yeah. I did most of it myself before, and I think the remaining part I will continue to do myself.
yeah, that's
Do you
cool.
work on this with him too, Alicia, or is this mostly his project?
I can paint. That's about all I do.
Yeah.
Give him a good vision for it anyway.
And is it a pleasant house for you, Alicia, to be in when you get to be there?
That's the thing. It's interesting, and this is, I think, something we're still learning. But in the beginning, I was like, this is, I want to live here, and I actually had to be brought back to neutral on that one because I was like, yes, this is it. This is the house. That's one of the things we feel like God has promised. Like he's building a house for us, basically. And so I was like, this is it. And then I had to be brought back, and it was more like, okay, actually, I'm open to the idea that maybe this is just like, this is a provision for this period of life.
Sure.
It's not the promise. But nonetheless, it was something I was like confident in. I was like, yes, this is the house the Lord has given us. Seeing that deal get worked out was more confirmation, and just I was trusting that this was it, and I was happy here. But again, the turning point was coming back from the Philippines and walking into the house for the first time and feeling that heaviness and feeling all the darkness that had accumulated in there, and it was just like, I don't feel peaceful here anymore. And even after we've cleaned it up and everything, it's like that feeling is still stuck. It's like, and we're still, we talk about it. We don't know exactly what to do with that at the moment, but we're just like, it did feel like what God for us. And now, it's kind of shifted. It's like we're ready to look somewhere else again because
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. It just means that there's don't hold on to it. It's I have other things. So, what's the truth about that? And it's not that you're not supposed to enjoy it. It's just that maybe don't look at it as a permanent place. So, yeah, it's pretty cool. Well, tell us a little bit about how did you get led to go to the Philippines and spend some time there, and then now you're back, and again you're processing along with the house and Philippines next steps. Tell us a little bit about just how you're approaching it, because you don't have an answer yet on that. But how did you come to know that, well, yeah, you're supposed to go to the Philippines for 3 months, and tell us about that process.
Well, like he shared earlier, or maybe last time, there was this little project he initially went over there to work on in 2019. So the end of 2019, and we weren't abiding, we weren't processing at that point. He was just kind of like, "Is it okay if I go over to the Philippines to do some work?" And I was like, sure. So that happened in 2019. He came back for COVID, and then 2020 rolls around, or 2021 rolls around, and we're thinking, okay, there's been some significant time that has passed now. Things are settling down. So, I think it's time to start, looking at it again and see, at that point, kind of the idea was we asked God, is it time to go? Or like, just kind of assuming, time to go. And so I did that. And in doing that, A, it seemed like God was always changing the subject. And B, I kept receiving words to go. That's what I was like so sure about. I would ask, and sometimes there were like 3 different instances that were very clear. It was like a strong feeling, a sense of go. And so I was like, all right, we're supposed to go to the Philippines. And so I told Colton, like, I got it. I think, I don't know, where were you at then in 2021 when I was like, go?
Like when we left?
No. When we were processing or abiding on it, and I said, I feel like we're supposed to go. This was like spring.
Yeah, I think I was like open to the idea, but part of it too was that the country was closed.
Yes, it was still closed.
Details.
Yeah, my boss, I mean, he's very politically connected, and he was pulling every string he could to try to get me some sort of special visa to get back in. The Philippines was closed to foreigners for about 2 full years. So from
Wow.
around March of 2020 until around the same time, I think 2022, it was closed. So she's like ready to go, and I'm like, well, I'll process it when the Philippines opens up.
Yeah.
Can you share what the business is down there, or is that not something you should share?
I can't get into the details. It's like mining essentially, and
Okay.
but yeah, it's a project where basically we either it's I don't know
It's just series of projects.
yeah, it's a series of projects, but we only make money when projects are completed.
Yeah.
So
Gotcha.
if projects aren't completed, we don't make money.
Yeah. Yeah. Simple.
So, I mean, with that, we kind of had this word, and Colton was a little bit still at a point where he'd been used to, I would get things from the Lord and he would just kind of sign off on it. And so I think at that point around, we went on the retreat in May of 2021, the abiding retreat. And so around that time, we were kind of in the spot of, okay, the Lord said go to the Philippines. We don't know what that looks like, but that's where we're at. And it was definitely Rich. He was like, we were sharing at the end of the retreat, and I think Colton shared like, we're supposed to go to the Philippines,
Yeah,
and then
like, of course it's the Philippines.
yeah, and Rich was like, did God say the Philippines? And that just that shook our whole world. We were like, and so we had this time of going back through all of our journals, which is, I'm so glad
to see what he actually said.
Yeah, see what he actually said. And it was so funny. I saw those two things. Number one, I would ask, and a lot of times he would change the subject. And B, if he did answer with go, it was like strangely go. Like I can only describe it without, it's very personal to me, but it was just odd how vague God was being. So I was like, okay, well, maybe not the Philippines, but that begs the question where. And then I don't know, we got to a point where we were just like, let's just go then. We had that verse in Genesis 12:1 that really spoke to Colton, and it's where Abram is called by God to go, leave your father's country and go into the land I will show you.
Yeah.
So we clung to that. God really drove this home for us personally, and so we were clinging to that idea that God would show us, and we were just to leave. And so it wasn't easy. Like we had been setting up lives. Like we had been living in Cincinnati for almost 2 years at that point, since being married, and we had just begun building up lives. I was coaching, he was doing his real estate projects, and it was not, it would have been so easy to just continue in that. We were doing pretty well at what we were doing.
Yeah.
And God really he just ripped us out of that by asking us to go. We had to cut ties with a lot of those things and a lot of the success we were having there, and just start back at ground zero, and even kind of less, because that's not normal. People people hear that and they're like, why? So it was a weird career decision, a weird life decision. And so we just left everything, and like he said, we went to Iceland for 3 months, just kind of trying to wait on the Lord and seek him. And we received some interesting words in that time, but nothing to show us where to go. But after coming back from then and beginning to learn to process and actually treat it very practically, like, okay, well, what is the truth of the situation, and factor in what do we actually desire just purely in our hearts without the flesh, what's the spirit desire in us that's unique to us.
Yeah.
And we began to talk through those things, landing in Colorado, and then continuing to learn to use that as we made decisions throughout life. We continued to stay in this mindset that God has set us apart from what's normal. So we never tried to, set down roots again. We were looking for a place to live, but we weren't trying to, reestablish careers or do anything like that, because we kind of understood at some point, God has something that he's clearly set us apart for. He uprooted our lives for. And so we were just kind of waiting in that. And obviously the Philippines continued to be at the back of our minds, but we never felt like it's time to go. God is calling us there. Until earlier this year, that's when we really began to take a look at that again. I was starting to get a sense of urgency, almost like, okay, it's time. And I was examining myself. I was like, I made this mistake before. Is this me or is this God? But it continued to, it just clearly seemed to be God. Colton was a little skeptical, and you can share about what you were going through in that time. But ultimately, in our processing, which was a little rough, we did come to a point in April where it was like 2 weeks out, 2 weeks out from the date we booked our ticket back to the Philippines. We were firmly convinced this is what God wants in this time. It's time to go. And that's when we went back. So you can backtrack a little and share your side of things.
Yeah. Well, and for me, I mean, because I was out there in 2019, and so I was part of a project that was supposed to take 2 weeks, and I was out there for 4 months, and it still wasn't done. And then that was when I came back to Colorado. Well, I guess not to Colorado, just back to the States, in Cincinnati. And so they had, sort of continued working. They took a long break for COVID, and they were still working. And my mindset was like, okay, like I want to go out, but I only want to go out like post a completed project. Like I don't want to go out pre a completed project and just do a whole bunch of like busy work that may or may not be moving things forward. Like if I'm going out there to work, I want to go out there and work once we've had success, and then can expect more success. And that was just kind of my mindset. I hadn't received that, but I was like, I don't want to go out pre, success. But yeah, so in April of this year, I was still very much of that mindset. And like the CEO had, reached out to us, and he was talking, like with urgency, but like he always talks with urgency. So I just kind of blew it off, and Alicia's like, we need to go. And I think we didn't process it quite like we should, because initially I think she booked a ticket to go out before me. I wasn't even going to go out. I was going to stay and work on the house, because I was like, I have work to do here. I have responsibilities here, and if we leave for 2 months and we come back, like the option will be about expired. But yeah, so she like booked a ticket, I think for like the 14th.
Yeah.
And
April
then
14th.
and then like once we kind of actually started processing it, like God really told us that like, yes, you are supposed to go out, but you're supposed to go out together.
Yeah, that was very important. Like stay together.
Yeah, that was like the thing number one was like go out together,
Yeah.
not your wife going out for 2 months by herself. But he's like you guys are supposed to go out together. And so we pushed her flight back to the 21st, and I booked a flight for me for the 21st. And I wasn't super happy about it, but it was clear that, God was, which seems to be a theme now that I'm saying it all out loud. I'm not super happy about it, but God's like, and I know it's right. And I'm like, But yeah. So we went out, and God had told me in my abiding that my purpose was to go out there and like see truth and speak truth. And so obviously I was hoping that was going to be truth, like pertaining to the success of the project. Like I go out and I'm like, hey, like we just need to change these 3 things and we'll be successful. Like that was what I was hoping for, and that was not how it went. And I won't get into all the details, but basically there was a lot of mismanagement going on. And my job ended up being just to see that, and I mean, because we, we're in the Philippines, we had like 100-something Filipinos working for us, and I was in charge of all of them for a significant portion of the time that we were out there, and just really building relationships with them, and just getting to the point where like because they're very non-confrontational, and the boss of our company is very aggressive and confrontational. And so Filipinos are very people-pleasing, and they're awesome. I love Filipinos. But like if they're being mistreated, a lot of times they don't say anything about it, because they just trust that like you have their best interest in heart, or like you don't really mean that. But my job essentially was to go out there and to build relationships with them and hear the truth from them, and then confront the CEO about it and talk to the investors about it. And that was what I did. And so not super life-giving for me, but very very important, very productive. Alicia had a much more life-giving trip out there.
But I do want to like bring it to the point, what I did, that's a whole different story, but I think that's an interesting part of where we're at now, because we're back in the States, and we now have this decision: do we go back? It was another thing we had kind of assumed, like once we start going out, but then we did expect truth would be good truth, and it was actually very revealing truth about the situation, kind of a situation of bringing what's done in the dark into the light.
Yeah.
And so now we're at this point where it's like, okay, well, what does our assignment look like from here then? Because we, that first part, seek the truth, speak the truth, that's been done. And so we are asking God, well, what's our next assignment? And in asking that, I was abiding individually at one point and very recently, and I just felt like it was a passage in Psalm 37. See if I can find it quick, but in Psalm 37 it talks about just dwelling in the land. Let me read the words.
Yeah, verse
Psalm 37, 3 and 4.
Yeah, 3
says,
and 4.
Yeah, trust in the Lord and do good, dwell in the land and befriend faithfulness. Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. And so I read that verse, and that one line that says, dwell in the land and befriend faithfulness, really, really stuck out to me, because something we had been processing together was like, we desire a safe and secure place. That was a big contrast. Like our house that we were in the process of buying no longer felt like a safe and secure place. And so Colton was expressing like, I feel like the place God has for us, it needs to feel safe and secure. And so it was interesting because this translation note for befriend faithfulness, it says, it can also mean feed on faithfulness or find a safe pasture. I was like, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
So dwell in the land and find a safe pasture. And for me, as I read it, it felt very strongly like a specific place in the Philippines that I had been to. Like that's just what I saw when I read that verse. And so I felt very, very strongly. And this was just this last week. I brought it up to Colton, and he's like, I don't know about that. And so we're in the process. Okay, well, there's no unity there. Like, let's keep processing then. And so in continuing this conversation day by day, we did come to the point where kind of trying to dig down, like, okay, well, do you know what feels unsettling about it? What feels uncomfortable about it? We kind of dug through this surface level issue, kind of pinpointed one issue, but then even below that, I was like, well, if you have this desire, we came to the point where it was like, Colton has this desire to be involved in something that he can see moving forward, progressing. There's a goal. And so I was like, well, that's a desire. That's a neutral desire. That's a spirit desire. And you want to seek it in the flesh. Like, let's start projects that are my idea. Like, let's go after it, make money, whatever it is. Like, just do something to be busy and have a goal and make progress. But what would you need from the Lord to trust, the next step from him, that you would be fulfilled in this? And you want to share what you shared, or?
Yeah, and we're actively in this now. So if you guys have,
this was like yesterday.
But I think for me, kind of like with, like with Joseph, like God, like when Joseph was very young, like God showed him, like the visions of like his family bowing down to him. And I don't need my family to bow down to me, but
knowing your family, they're not going to do that. Don't worry.
They take a long time. But no, I think like what and at least, just kind of like what my heart felt like I would like is, basically being shown not the plan, but like the goal, like God, like to Joseph, he's like, I have, this position that I'm going to give you. And God didn't tell Joseph the plan, because if he did, Joseph probably would have said, forget the palace. Like, I don't want to, be thrown in jail and thrown in a pit and, all this different stuff. But like, Joseph had that, and it was something that he could hold on to. And I've received a lot about like leadership, and I've received like a lot of words and people speaking to me about, like a position of leadership that God has for me. But I don't really know like what that looks like. And so I've basically been asking God for like a word to hold on to, because I don't need the plan. All I need is the next step. But like something that I can hold on to, so that when God's giving me the next step, like I can trust that is, moving forward towards the goal, rather than,
even if it doesn't look like something.
Even if like God is, even if he is telling us to like go to, the Philippines and just learn to like rest in him, and to, like befriend faithfulness, find a safe pasture. Like, to me, I'm like, if I go there for 6 weeks and I just, live there and befriend faithfulness, like that doesn't feel like I'm accomplishing something versus like here, like I have real estate projects, I have stuff going on in Cincinnati. It's like here I can work and I can accomplish things. But if I just go to the Philippines for 6 weeks, like I'm not making any additional money. Things here may not run as well as they could if I am here. But yeah, if I have that word to hold on to, it's like, okay, like God is using this to prepare me for the next step.
Yeah. So you would, again, as you're processing God's will, it's about step by step receiving what he's saying. So you would look at safe pasture and start to process, what does that look like for each of you? What does that mean for me to live in and enjoy a safe pasture? And you got to describe that element of it. And then for you, the desires of your heart, and both of you should actually process that. Okay, what are the desires of your heart at the moment, particularly as you look at the next phase of the things you're going to be involved in? What's kind of important to you? And both of you, because of Alicia, you're doing a variety of things with ministry and swimming, and what do those things look like? And Colton, for you, what does that look like for you? And you try to be as pure as possible, not try to give a specific, it should be, real estate or this. It's just, what are the things that are important to you for that? And then God,
and the whys behind some of that. I think
God will start to, solve what we call enigmas. Is that, how's this all going to come together? He says, I have an answer for that. Work it. I'll show you then ultimately what that is. And of course, you've learned, you got to stay neutral. So don't even I'm going to put Philippines as my picture and see how that's going to work. It's just go to purity and then let God show you what that looks like, including the Philippines, which will be a big part of the answer. So it'll be fun to have you process it. We know you will, and we'll have when you get your decision. We'll have you back on and say, okay, how did you come to that? And
right.
That'll be fun. And one thing he does want you to do is enjoy the process,
right?
So that have expectation, kind of like what you said before, Alicia, is that you really get excited about the adventure, and this ought to be interesting, to see what he's going to do for you. So.
I just wanted to highlight one thing, because Alicia said it so well, but as they're talking about this, and other people who are listening and processing decisions as well, when you talked about going back to your journal and seeing what he actually said, I think that's such an important part of continuing this process. If you want to, Rich described staying in purity, really, as you're seeking him. I think that's a key part of that, is writing it all down, so that you can go back, because it's so much more obvious when you go back and read what you have just laced into the conversation, the narrative yourself, versus what he said, if you actually made note of what he said. And so I think that is an important part of staying pure in the process too.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for sharing. And when I tell people about when you're walking with God, you're going to be on one heck of an adventure. I said, I know a couple that's they've been on one heck of an adventure, and they got more to come, and it'll be fun to share that story. So be encouraged and enjoy, relax, get into your new house, and then keep asking, seeking, and knocking. It's going to be fun, and we're happy to help you as we can.
Can't wait to see what God does, right?
Yeah. Heavenly Father, we just pray blessing over Colton and Alicia. They have great hearts just to follow. They're learning what it means to follow, and you have an answer for this next phase. I just pray that they actually enjoy receiving it, and that they know, and they already know, it'll be best and none better. And so just maybe make it super clear to them and confirmed, and then they know what to do next. And we just pray for great blessing with whatever you're calling them to be part of, in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. Well, thank you for joining us, everyone. And thank you, Colton and Alicia, for just expressing your faith so beautifully. Yeah. Such a great example to everybody. Yeah. So much fun to hear their stories. Yeah. So.
Thank you, guys.
All right. We'll see you soon.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Come and See, your podcast for truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by All for Jesus Living Waters Ministry. Send us your questions and comments, and tune in tomorrow for more answers to your personal questions about living life in God's truth. Remember, God's will is best and none better. His truth brings peace in this world of chaos.